We'll pick up our story with the assassination of Philip by a young Macedonian noble named Pausanias. Alexander will take the opportunity to quickly secure enough support so that he will, with minimal resistance, be able to accede to the throne and become the king. Now, one of the first things on Alexander's priority list is, of course, to carry out the invasion of Persia that his father had been carefully planning for about 2 years. Now, Alexander chooses an opportune moment to invade the Persian Empire because, as you can see from this particular slide, and I know there's a lot of text, but you can see that the Persian Empire is undergoing a period of great instability right at the very moment where the Macedonians are about to invade. If you look midway down the slide in black text, in the year 338 BCE, at the very moment that Philip was achieving victory over the Thebans and the Athenians at Chaeronea, the Persian Empire begins its long descent into major instability with the poisoning of the great king Artaxerxes III. Now, his youngest son will take the throne as Artaxerxes IV, but he will be murdered in the year 336, just as Philip was murdered in the same year. But now we see a difference in the way that both kingdoms will handle the successor. Alexander will achieve the critical support that he needs to be viewed as a legitimate heir. In the Persian situation, a noble named his name was Cotomanus, and he will take the name Darius III. In memory of Darius I, one of the greatest of the great kings. Of course, you've studied him and his attempt to take over Greece back in the 490s. Well, Darius III is not viewed as legitimate by the Persian nobles, and this is going to cause all sorts of problems. Instability. We will see revolts occur in Babylon and in Egypt, and Darius needs time to stabilize his own regime, but he does not have the time because Alexander is on the march. Now, when we look at Alexander's campaigns, and we will in some detail because he is considered by many historians to be the greatest military commander in history, period. We will see that Alexander has inherited quite a few advantages thanks to his father Philip's efforts to construct the Macedonian war machine. Alexander will play by the book that his father wrote, and that is the hammer and anvil approach to achieving victory on the battlefield. You use the phalanx to pin the opponent, and you use the companion cavalry to find a gap in the enemy line, a weak spot that can be exploited with a charge that will totally dislocate the enemy position. Such was the case at Chaeronea, and such will be the case in the major battles that Alexander will fight against the Persians, and his last battle will be fought against an Indian Raja named Porus. I've created kind of a mnemonic device to get you guys to remember the sequence of battles that occurs. And if you can remember the slogan, "Get inside the gap, hero," which is basically a very simple way of remembering how Alexander achieves victory. Each one of those letters, "Get inside the gap, hero," stands for a battle. The G for get stands for the Granicus River, the first battle that Alexander will fight against the Persians. The I, Battle of Issus. The T, the Siege of Tyre along the coast of what is now Lebanon. The G, taking place in what is now northern Iraq at the Battle of Gaugamela, in which Alexander will achieve decisive victory. And finally, the H, which will occur around the area India-Pakistan border at the Hydaspes River, now the Jhelum River. So get inside the gap, hero. These battles, that's the strategy that will see Alexander victorious. Now in 334, Alexander will begin his invasion officially by crossing the Hellespont from the European side into the Asiatic side, in what is now, of course, Turkey. And he will stop off at Troy, where he will conduct various sacrifices and games to commemorate the Trojan War. And he and his best friend Hephaestion will run naked around the tomb of Achilles. And this is, for Alexander, of great significance, this idea of kind of a Trojan War 2.0, in which he's leading a great coalition army, most of it Macedonian, but certainly had many Greek mercenaries, against the Asians, against, in this case, the Persians, whereas Agamemnon, way back in 1200 BCE or so, had led a great coalition of Greeks against the Trojans. So the symbolism was not lost on Alexander, and of course it was said he slept with a copy of the Iliad underneath his pillow. So in 334 it begins, and as you can see from the numbers there, 50,000 men total. The Macedonian army was not overwhelmingly large, particularly when you compare it to, say, Xerxes' invasion force of 480. But again, it's quality, not quantity, that will count. Now, when the local Persian governors, the satraps as they're known, find out that Alexander has indeed crossed into their territory, they throw together a force heavy with cavalry and 10,000 Greek mercenaries who are in the pay of the Persians. And unfortunately for the Persians, they do not have the combat experience that the Macedonians have. And even Alexander at this point, very limited combat experience, but still, he's surrounded by some of his father's generals, particularly an older man named Parmenion, who will serve Alexander very well. So a lot of experience on the Macedonian side collectively, not a lot of experience on the Persian side. And the Greek mercenary commander working for the Persians, a guy named Memnon of Rhodes, he understands that in many ways the Persians could be outmatched here. So why fight Alexander at all? Why not just burn all the crops and withdraw into Asia? Alexander's army, like all armies, marches on its stomach, and if it doesn't have any food, it won't be able to march. So he floats this idea, but the Persian satraps, these Persian governors, will have nothing to do with that strategy, because it will be their crops, or certainly the provincial crops, that will be burnt. And of course, crops are wealth, crops are taxes. And the Persian satraps probably underestimated Alexander a bit and thought, no, we can handle this with a direct confrontation. And unfortunately for them, it'll prove to be the wrong move. Now, the Granicus River, where the first battle will take place, is a good place for defense, but the deployment of the Persians was all wrong. In this diagram, you see Persian cavalry, noted by the box with the slash in it in red, is deployed in front of the Greek mercenaries, who are infantry. The solid color indicates infantry, usually a phalanx. Macedonians are in blue, and what we'll basically see here is Alexander recognizes right away how he can open up a gap in the enemy line. He'll send some of his cavalry into the river itself to initiate the battle. The Persians, who are mostly nobles, Persian cavalry, again, like most of the ancient world, you had to be wealthy to own a horse. The Persian nobles had their own code of honor, and they felt they should be in the front fighting. So they take the bait. They go and make an attack on this small cavalry force that Alexander has sent into the river, and they all begin their focus on this particular area here. A gap opens up in this area. Alexander, with his companions, will charge through, dislocate the Persian cavalry, and ultimately get behind the Greek mercenaries, who are behind a ridgeline and are kind of unaware as to what's going on. So we see that the Persian deployment of forces was fatal, and Alexander's carrying out of the hammer-anvil tactics was a textbook case of how to get it done. The Persian nobles, the cavalry, will fight bravely, but they'll find themselves surrounded and totally dislocated, and they will flee the battlefield because they have that luxury, being horsemen. The Greek mercenaries will be surrounded, and ultimately Alexander will order them all killed. And this was to send a message to other Greeks who were serving the Persian great king. You will get no mercy from me. You are fighting against your fellow Greeks. You deserve no mercy. So Granicus is a very, very important victory because it begins Alexander's momentum. And he and his army will march through what is now Turkey, or the Anatolian Plateau, and come down along the eastern Mediterranean seaboard. And it's here where the second battle will take place. It is at this battle, at Issus, which you see here, the other red kind of icon, that King Darius himself is present, along with his immediate family and a load of treasure. And it's at Issus that we see kind of a replay of Granicus, where we'll see the battle basically be a race between each side's cavalry force to break the opposing side's line. And quite frankly, the Persians cannot stand up to a charge of these companion cavalry. And it is at Issus that Alexander, again leading the companions, will break the Persian left flank. His right, their left. Again, Persians are red, Macedonians are blue. So, unfortunately for Darius, he, probably seized by a moment of panic, flees the battlefield. And of course, this will destroy his reputation amongst those who are present at the battle, and word will travel that maybe this great king is not up to snuff as far as battlefield behavior goes. So from Issus, Alexander decides that before marching further eastward, directly east into Asia, he will choose to travel the coast. And he's doing this because he wants to capture every one of the Persian naval bases. Because if you think about this and look at this map, if Alexander and his army take off and head towards the heartland of the Persian Empire, well, the Persians, who still have Phoenicians as allies and other seagoing peoples located here, could perhaps mount a naval invasion of his homeland. So Alexander does not have a navy per se. He does have an army, and he's going to use that army to strip away the Persian naval advantage. So the first stop will be Tyre, and then further south to Gaza, the two main naval bases that the Persians are using. Now, at the siege of Tyre, it is a 7-month siege. It's known as an epic effort by the Macedonians, in part because the Tyre, the port city, is not located on the mainland. It's just off the coast area, heavily fortified island port. And Alexander has to order his men to construct a causeway connecting the mainland to the island itself. The Tyrians will destroy the first causeway, so Alexander has his men construct a second one, and while the Tyrians are focused on what they think the attack will come on the causeway, Alexander and a fleet will make a rapid assault in a gap in the enemy defenses, because again, most of the Tyrians are focused here. They've stripped away the defenses of much of the other areas of the wall. That's where Alexander will strike. And again, another example of get inside the gap hero. So Alexander, after securing Tyre and Gaza and then moving along into Egypt, will, after a brief diversion at the oasis at Siwa, in which he is pronounced a son of God, Alexander decides that he's ready to move deep into the heart of the Persian Empire, and this is where we will see the showdown at the Battle of Gaugamela. And it's at this battle that will determine who will be king of Asia. And Darius III certainly knows this is maybe his last chance to stop this invader, so he gathers an enormous force, just about every weapon system he can come up with, You could see them listed there: infantry, cavalry, sky the chariots, and Indian war elephants. But once again, it will be Alexander's tactics that will achieve decisive victory. Alexander is basically going to stick to the script in the sense of get inside the gap hero. He is going to have his phalanx take a pounding. He knows that the phalanx will be punished by the various Persian weapon systems, but he believes that they can hold on long enough for him to find a gap in the Persian line. He will charge that gap with the companion cavalry and achieve the decisive victory that he has been waiting for. So the battle will begin with Alexander ordering his Macedonians to advance. Darius will counter with the launching of his sky chariots. Again, those are chariots with wheels extending from, blades extending from either wheel. The battle itself, I think, was masterfully done in Oliver Stone's version of Alexander. I think it was released back in 2004 or so. The movie was largely panned, but the Battle of Gaugamela itself was quite well done, accurate as to what the sources provide. But basically, you'll see again Persians in red, Macedonians in blue. Alexander here on the right, the Macedonian right, with his companion cavalry, and we'll see the Persians ultimately make a fatal mistake when Darius orders his cavalry to ride and try to envelope or outflank the Macedonians. And when this happens, you're going to see basically from this line over a gap appear. And this is what Alexander has been waiting for. So he's got his units taking a pounding here, taking a pounding here, but now the gap has opened, and this is what Alexander again has been waiting for. He'll charge the gap, desperately seeking a direct confrontation with Darius himself, and we'll see that according to the sources, Alexander, as always, leading from the front, accompanied by a few of his companions, as you see here in this painting. And we do see a moment, again according to the sources, where Alexander and Darius are close enough to one another where Alexander is able to hurl a javelin, and it does not hit Darius, but that's enough again to spook him into retreating. And of course, back in the ancient world, if you saw your great king retreating, you were 2 steps behind. So at Gaugamela, Alexander, and of course this image is taken from antiquity. It's a mosaic found in a bathhouse in Pompeii, and this is Darius, wide-eyed and freaked out. Alexander is right here. You can just see Alexander's warhorse Bucephalus, and if this image were any wider, you would see Alexander getting ready to hurl a javelin. And actually, this mosaic depicts the Battle of Issus, but you have similar occasions of Darius fleeing the field. There will be no recovery from Darius. He will ultimately be killed by some of his nobles who are tired of supporting this guy, and you'll see other Persian nobles try to take on the mantle of great king, try to become the leader of the kind of a rump Persian empire, much of it now under Macedonian control. But you see this phase of Alexander's campaigns in the Persian Empire, about 3 years. He is campaigning in the Persian provinces or satrapies of Bactria and Sogdiana. And these areas now are Pakistan, and we get up into Central Asia. and I should say Afghanistan and into Central Asia. And in order to deal with what is, for all intents and purposes, a guerrilla war, Alexander is basically forced to found cities. And he has done this earlier, but the pace of city founding really picks up because he's got to have fortified positions from which his army can deal with a very mobile enemy. And you'll see a number of these Alexandrias founded, and some of them, of course, the name has been changed, but if you are familiar with the current conflict in Afghanistan, you'll know cities like Herat and Kandahar. Well, both of those cities began their existence as Alexandrias. So a pretty brutal 3-year counterinsurgency in which Alexander will not achieve total dominance of the region, but certainly will achieve enough control to call it his own, in part because he marries into some of the top families, the tribal families of the Bactrian and Sogdiana nobility. So it's at this point that I want to kind of shift focus away from the military side to Alexander's vision. And it remains very controversial to this day as to whether or not Alexander truly had a kind of universal vision of melding together or merging together Macedonians and Persians to create a kind of a super race. There is no doubt that he will adopt Persian customs. He will dress as a Persian noble on occasion. He will order a mass marriage of some of the key Macedonian nobility. He basically forces them to take Persian women as brides. And he will try to cultivate a generation of young Persians, basically try to train them as Macedonians, and he'll even give them the name of successors. And he will make it, according to the sources, make it no secret of his desire that with this kind of new brotherhood of Persian and Macedonian, these people could go on to rule greater and greater parts of the world. And some of these initiatives of Alexander's are very controversial, particularly number one, when Alexander begins adopting the Persian custom of proskynesis, which is basically a Persian custom by which an inferior would prostrate themselves before a superior. And no Macedonian would do that. I mean, this is something in the Macedonian mind that you would do to a god. Do for a god, but you don't do it for a man, even a king. And there is great tension that begins to develop amongst the Macedonians because of Alexander's seeming to go native on them. And many of these guys have been on campaign with Alexander for years. They've marched thousands of miles with this guy, but quite frankly, they're tired and they want to go home. So Alexander's going to run into some problems with his army. And of course, with good reason, because Alexander simply will not stop. Once he conquers the very eastern parts of the Persian Empire, those bordering on what is now Pakistan today, he decides to go even further. He decides that he will he's heard geographically that the Indus River, it's not known as the Indus back then, but there is a great river that flows into a great sea. And it seems that one of his intentions was to see if you could send ships on this river down into this great sea and get back to Greece via the sea. His tutor, Aristotle, the great Athenian philosopher and geographer and naturalist, scientist, Aristotle has filled him with these tales about how the world is shaped, and Alexander wants to test some of these theories. But of course, it's a hard sell to your men when they're exhausted, and of course, you get into some hard country when you begin to descend down the Indus River Valley. So ultimately, a battle is fought, the last of his major battles at the Hydaspes, against a king, Porus. And I won't bore you with the details, but Alexander ekes out a victory. It's a very bloody battle, allows Porus to retain control of his kingdom as long as he will be a vassal of Alexander's. And then it's at this point where Alexander's men are like, we're not going any farther. And Alexander is forced to turn back. And of course, he's a little peeved at this. He had grander visions. But it's here where Alexander commits a major error in judgment by when his troops do march south along the Indus River, he decides that he's going to return to the Persian heartland via a route that's going to take him through the Gedrosian Desert. And this is a grueling, arduous journey. He'll lose quite a few camp followers mainly. These are women who would follow the camp for various reasons, and some soldiers, but it's a tough slog. Ultimately, the army does make it back to the capital cities that the Persians had established, Persepolis first, then on to Susa, and finally to Babylon. And it's here in the city of Babylon that Alexander will die of fever. And what specifically brought about the fever is still, kind of a mystery. Could have been malaria, could have been other things, could have been just exhaustion, because it's at this point that, of course, Alexander, who always led from the front, has sustained a couple of pretty significant wounds during the course of all these battles. So he will die just short of his 33rd birthday in 323. And what happens next? Well, this vast empire that Alexander and his Macedonian army had carved out for themselves will not remain intact for very long. In part because Alexander has been served all this time by a series of very capable, very ambitious generals, and these generals, upon Alexander's death, will begin to carve up the empire. There is a group that wants to keep the empire intact, but that group is quickly outvoted by the more ambitious generals. And ultimately, to bring this lecture to a conclusion, Alexander's vast empire is divided amongst his successors, called the Diadochi. And these are his generals, Antigonus, Lysimachus, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and Cassander. And we'll see Seleucus get the biggest chunk, those areas that had constituted much of the Persian Empire. Antigonus will get a sizable chunk. Ptolemy gets Egypt. Cassander gets Macedonia. And Lysimachus gets Thrace. And of course, it won't be very long before these guys begin fighting amongst themselves, wanting an ever greater piece of the pie. And that in itself will lead to decades of war that will keep the area destabilized. And ultimately, what you'll see further to the west is Rome begin to rise, begin to develop, and ultimately begin to rise as all of these Macedonians begin to basically self-destruct.